Good morning and welcome to the COVID-19 version of the Swimming New South Wales Technical Official Forum. It's a really good turnout, and it seems this webinar is providing a good opportunity for those regional and just generally busy officials who may struggle to attend the normal face-to-face forum that we hold in July, in Sydney each July. And it's great to see so many faces that I haven't seen for a while that I'd normally see, on pool decks or just generally on weekends, but we haven't had the chance to do that for some time now. And it's also great to put faces to the names of people that I haven't previously met before, but I'm sure everyone's heard from me before plenty of times. So thank you in advance to our guest speakers, so Sarah Connor from Black Dog Institute, and Lydia Dowse from Swimming Australia, who'll be joining a bit later prior to her her presentation. And thank you also to the TSC. So it should be noted that the TSC is continuing to work relentlessly throughout this period. They're constantly looking for ways to continue to engage with the TO community and ensuring the well-being of the community, and holding events like this forum. This year, they're undertaking our first referee course, which was initially a combination of face-to-face and webinar workshops. And it aims to get the attendees ready for their referee exam and practical assessments by the end of the year. Despite the difficulties with COVID-19, the TSC has devised ways to continue showcasing this course, and we've still got, I think, 15 of the 17 original attendees continuing through this course now, which is completely virtual now, completely online. So it's a testament to the way that they're working in this time. Couple of housekeeping rules, really, just in terms of the, your video and muting and everything. So I'll just take you through a couple of things if you haven't already figured it out. We've got, I'll put everyone on mute because I have the power to. So just remember, if you do want to ask a question, just unmute yourself, and I'll explain where that is in a moment. So if you're on a computer, it's generally the bottom left-hand corner. There's a mute button. So I might just, if I can, I might just mute you all now, so you can see that what it will look like. So bear with me. Now down the bottom, you should now all see there will just be like a red line, and you can click unmute on it if anyone is wishing to ask a question, that kind of thing. Just make sure when you are talking that you're obviously unmuted, otherwise you won't be heard. I'll leave it up to the individual presenters to let you know whether questions are encouraged during the presentations or leaving it till the end. Some of you may have your webcams on or off at present, so a lot of you do have it on, and that's great. If you do want to ask a question and you do have a camera, just as a courtesy, have your webcam on, just so we know who is asking the question. If I do hear background noise at any time and someone's forgotten to mute themselves, I'll just keep on top of that and try and mute them as well. So it shouldn't be too much of a disruption from hearing the presenter at all. The different views, it looks like, I think most of you are on a speaker view. Now, if you can see, if you can just see a big screen of me talking, that's probably good. That's what you want to keep on, because then when someone like our presenter is sharing their screen, you'll be able to see an enlarged version of that. Otherwise, top right-hand corner, there should be, it might be like 9 little dots, or it might say gallery view. Just make sure you're on the speaker view where it does have a larger version of the person who's talking. So whoever's making the most noise at the time, basically that's who is showing on the screen. So for those of you who don't have that up at the moment, I'd recommend that, because we will have presenters sharing their screen, like a presentation, for instance, and you'll want to see that. We'll have if you're unable to unmute yourself or be heard on the chat, be heard speaking, there is the chat function that was just brought up prior. That's down the bottom. That should be down the bottom again if you're on a laptop. So it's just along the black bar along the bottom near the mute and stop video or video. So just click chat, and then you'll see it should come up on the right hand side. You'll be able to ask a question. But I would ask that if we can use this as a last resort. So hopefully we don't have too many questions in that section, as it may be a bit difficult to keep across. We'll have 5-minute breaks between the presentations for everybody, just to go get a drink, go to the bathroom, that kind of thing. So just be aware that, yeah, you'll have time to do that between the presentations. So with all that said, I'd like to welcome our first guest presenter today. Her name is Sarah Connor, and she's from the Black Dog Institute. So her topic of conversation, sorry, just this person. So her topic of conversation will be about what the Black Dog Institute is and why Swimming New South Wales has partnered with them, and discussing some points of note with the survey that we sent out to all you officials earlier this year. So welcome, Sarah, and over to you.
Great, thank you so much for having me and welcoming me here this morning. I'll try and start to share my screen. Oh, it says, Josh, that the host has disabled my participant sharing.
Sorry, I will pass that over to you right now.
Okay. I promise I won't share anything scandalous. Okay, let me just try now.
Should be able to from now. You'll just have to...
Give me 1 second. It's just should be right now.
That's good. And you'll just, before you, at the end of your presentation, you'll just have to... I'll let you know how to make me host.
Okay, sure.
Back again at the end before you log off.
And can you, sorry, can you see that from the beginning now?
Yep, we can.
Okay, fantastic. I'll just move myself over here. Okay, fantastic. Thanks again. I do want to commence by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land. I'm presenting to you today from Gadigal land, and it's exciting to know there's people from all over the state today that I'm presenting to. To kick off, as Josh said, I'm Sarah Connor. I'm the Head of Education at Black Dog Institute. And my role here is overseeing the development and delivery of education programs right across the country into workplaces, for health professionals, for schools and community. I've been with Black Dog Institute for 10 years, actually nearly 11 years now, and I thought that was a long time until I started engaging with Swimming New South Wales and realised that you've all volunteered forever. And it's wonderful. It was amazing to kind of see that. I think it was over 1/3 of you that we surveyed volunteered for over 15 years, but I've met quite a few that have volunteered for 40 or so as well. So kudos to you. And I guess on that point, happy National Volunteers Week this week. I think volunteers are just kind of the real wonderful fabric of community. I started my role back 10 years ago at Black Dog Institute, managing our volunteer program, and got a lot of joy out of that experience, working with such passionate, committed people. And we have a wonderful volunteer program as well. And I've also volunteered over the years. I volunteered in East Africa and Asia, doing different teaching courses, and I volunteered locally here in community programs as well. And I think that's because like you, I think volunteering is really important, and that we can play a really important role in the community. And today, I'm looking forward to talking to you about a little bit more about Black Dog Institute and how we've worked with Swimming New South Wales to date. And we're really just at the beginning phase of our collaboration. And I also wanted to touch on some support and information and resources that we have at Black Dog Institute that might be helpful for all of you, or for your friends and family members as well. And in terms of asking questions, it might be easiest to do it at the end of the session. And so please jot down your questions and then we'll open that up for you. Okay, so to commence, for those of you who aren't aware, our mission at Black Dog Institute is to enable mentally healthier lives. So we're a mental health medical research institute. We really have a focus on the translation of that research into practical support and services for the community. So we are national. The conditions we focus on, our research on, are depression and anxiety, and also suicide prevention. I think of key concern to us is that mental illness is very prevalent in our community. 1 in 5 of us will experience mental ill health this year alone, and 1 in 2 of us will experience a mental illness in the course of our lifetime. So mental illness does impact all of us one way or another, because if it's not us going through it, it'll be someone that we love and care about. So it's really important for us to all be knowledgeable about it. I think also a big concern, unlike some other illnesses, there's a lot of stigma around mental health, and that gets in the way of people seeking help. So we also know that about 60% of people who experience a mental health condition will not seek help. And that means we've got a lot of people suffering in isolation, suffering in silence and alone. And the thing is, people aren't alone. When I told you about the prevalence, it's actually very common. So we really want to play a key role in breaking down that stigma. And a lot of our research effort is going into looking at solutions that we can make available to people, wherever they are in the country. And technology has been a big key to that. So we do at Black Dog Institute focus a lot on e-mental health and resources as well. And I think, what we've seen, all of us now, look at us here presenting, reaching out from home, from our lounge rooms, COVID has kind of changed our world. And it was so fabulous logging on to see all your faces, and I'm sure some people have done this before, but others haven't. And we're finding new ways to connect with each other, new ways to do our work. And of course, some of that work has been put aside for now. And I know that's the Swimming New South Wales community has been so heavily impacted during this time. So the challenges of COVID are also a concern for us at Black Dog Institute. We are hearing a lot about concerns in the community around loneliness and isolation that is occurring because of that. And also we're seeing increased anxiety, which I think is really normal and natural response to this situation. There's a lot of uncertainty and of course health concerns during this time as well. So I will be talking a little bit later about some of the support that we have available. We've been working day and night to come up with a range of different resources and support that can be available to support people through this time. And we've got a range of education programs, a range of clinical services available, and I will highlight those at the conclusion of this session because it may be relevant for you, or it may be relevant for your family, friends, loved ones. And we have seen through our website a significant spike in the engagement of our resources, which is really positive because we want people to, taking proactive measures to get them through this really challenging time. So Swimming New South Wales approached Black Dog Institute late last year, and they came to us with a desire to increase support of the Swimming New South Wales community, who from the outset I heard was a very passionate, wonderful community who's doing really important work. And so Swimming New South Wales sought to better understand some of the challenges faced by technical officials, and we're really keen to know what role they could play to help promote some positive mental health for you as key members of the community. And so what we suggested we start with is to do a survey. And so to really hear from as many of you as possible and really start to understand and listen to what your experience is like as a starting point. So the aim of the survey was to examine the current levels of engagement, satisfaction and wellbeing amongst Swimming New South Wales technical officials. And the approach we took was to first of all conduct a survey. And we did that in November, late November last year. And then we conducted a focus group with a cross-section of stakeholders, both staff and volunteers, to kind of dive deeper into some of the themes that we were seeing coming out of the survey. And then in March, the beginning of March this year, just before the world changed, we submitted a report to Swimming New South Wales with some recommendations about a way forward. And so what I want to talk to you I'll take you through now is some of the key findings of the survey and some of the recommendations that we put forward. And there's some parts of that where there's opportunities for us to continue to collaborate with Swimming New South Wales over time, and we're really looking forward to that. So, and I also understand that I think some of these findings are on your intranet as well. So I think there's more detail there that you can refer to. I'll be talking at a fairly high level around the report. So the first thing was that we had 132 responses to the survey, which is fairly good. That's a good sized response. And overall, what we found was that Swimming New South Wales, I mean, it's not going to come as a surprise to you. This is definitely not revolutionary or groundbreaking, but you're very community minded. And there was a very strong sense of community and contributing to the community, a very strong motivation that came through from your group around the importance of giving back to the community. And I think that was that's something we see across all kind of volunteer programs as well. We also found that the majority of volunteers reported feeling motivated, they reported feeling supported and connected, and also mentally and physically well. And the vast majority also reported like you feel like you make a difference in your role. And of course, that's really important. That's why you turn up. You want to make a difference in your community. And so it was great to see that the vast majority of you really feel like you do make a difference in your role. And there were high satisfaction levels reported in relation to the opportunity to engage and support swimmers. And there were lots of lovely comments around your satisfaction around, you know, seeing the smile on the swimmers' faces when they're achieving. And there was a real kind of sense of joy and engagement that you felt in that. We also had a lot of high satisfaction reported around the sense of personal achievement in developing your skills throughout your engagement with Swimming New South Wales. And importantly, there was high satisfaction around that sense of community and that sense of connection. So the opportunity for those social interactions and connections and making friends. And certainly when I logged on and I could see lots of you kind of saying, oh, it's great to see you. And, you know, I think they're really important, those social connections and sharing those really wonderful moments together. So overall, what we were seeing in the survey is that that there were really positive aspects to the experience across the board. We know that it's really important for well-being, those experiences of connection, of feeling part of something, feeling part of a community and feeling like you're giving back. And so, so I think these are, you know, really fantastic things to see. We also looked, there's obviously a range of demographics that engage in your volunteer program. So we also wanted to understand, is there any difference in motivation or feelings of support or engagement, whether you've just started out volunteering or whether you're further down the track. So we did have a look at the survey results by even gender, by So, and what we found was that across demographics, students were actually more motivated than those who'd been around a bit longer. We were actually finding comparable results. And that was the same for volunteer mental and physical health as well. Now, there were
Sorry, Sarah, is anyone
I think it's
anyone
really
else
important to highlight that the results weren't positive.
She's bouncing in and out.
Oh,
Sarah?
yes.
Yes, sorry, it was just cutting in and out for a little bit.
Oh, okay.
Maybe at the start of this bit part. You sounded okay then, but I'm not sure if it was just mine or others. But I think there's a few other people.
Am I freezing or something?
It was just kind of going in and out. It wasn't freezing as such. but you're sounding okay now. So so Anthony just written in the chat, can we go over the demographics again, please? So if we could start from, or maybe go back through through that bit, and then, because so there might have been a bit of interruption from that point.
Yeah, absolutely. And
great,
please,
thank you.
Josh, I can't see the chat, so can you please jump in?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's just gone in and out again a little bit, but hopefully it passes.
If there's anything there.
Oops, just what? Are you? Oh, yep.
I'll jump back to the. Shall I continue, Josh?
Yeah. It actually sounds okay at the moment for me. Yep. Let's go from there, and we'll see if it improves shortly.
Okay, sure thing. And I can try later on without my camera as well, if that will help. So in terms of back to the demographics, what I was saying was that in terms of the survey data that we looked at, when we were collecting the data, we also collected, a range of demographics. So we looked at age, gender, length of service as well. And what we were keen to understand was, were there differences amongst those demographics in terms of their feelings of motivation, their feelings of support, their well-being, and their feelings of connection within the Swimming New South Wales community. But what we found that there weren't actually any differences. So we didn't find any significant differences of the motivation for people who've just started versus those who've been around a lot longer. There wasn't anything significant there. So that was quite an interesting find as well. And we also found that for the volunteer mental and physical health as well, there weren't significant differences in physical or mental health. We did find one key component around physical health for some of our older volunteers who were reporting that pain did interrupt some of their engagement. So that was kind of one of the only outliers that we saw. And then while the news that I reported was, really generally good overall, what we also found was that there's still a minority of people who do not share positive experiences in their volunteer role. And of course, that's very important for us, for this to be considered and listened to. So, for example, some people reported low levels of motivation to volunteer, and some reported low levels of perceived support from Swimming New South Wales. And nearly a third of the participants reported feeling downhearted or blue quite a bit of the time. So they were areas that, were areas that we need to kind of dive into and look at it a bit more closely. What we did find is that I mentioned, the rates of depression and anxiety we experience as a population. What we found through the survey that those experiences of distress within a Swimming New South Wales community were representative of the whole population. It's not like we have significant differences of mental health versus in the swimming community versus the rest of the population. But it certainly did show that there's some people who are doing it tough quite a bit of the time. Also flagged was a desire for increased support across a variety of domains. So including financial support, travel support, support to develop skills, and support in resolving grievances. And so there are a couple of areas there around, while most people feel very well supported, some had a desire for increased support, particularly in those domains, and they were the main key domains that we heard about. And there was also a recurring theme that we saw around a desire for improved courtesy and respectful interactions. So that came through as well. So they were some of the more not as positive, but still areas to really listen to and understand more about. And that kind of formed the basis of some of our recommendations to take back to Swimming New South Wales for their consideration. So the recommendations that we've taken back to Swimming New South Wales, we did hear, as I reported in the survey, that there was a percentage of people who were really not feeling all that well at the moment, or not feeling great. And of course, this was before COVID, so we do expect that that would increase during this more recent period. So some of the recommendations we had was to look at what initiatives Swimming New South Wales could embrace to promote positive mental health for the Swimming New South Wales community. And that's something that on the next slide, I'll show some of the resources that are available and can be engaged with. And the other couple of areas that are not really, I guess, in Black Dog Institute's domain, but something we sent back for review and consideration for Swimming New South Wales was to look at reviewing volunteer policies and procedures and look at reviewing their implementation and training and support around the range of policies and procedures. So the policies and procedures we recommended for review are the Code of Conduct, volunteer reward and recognition, and also grievance management. And that, which was kind of flagged on the last slide. And also, again, we said look at providing training and support. And again, that's around those kind of policies and procedures as well. So they were the kind of three key recommendations that we took back. And it's the first recommendation, obviously, that Black Dog Institute is able to collaborate with Swimming New South Wales across the course of time to look at those initiatives and how we can help to promote that. And I wanted to flag with you, for all of you, for your friends, for your family, for your kids, for your grandkids, there's lots of resources and support available to promote mental health. I've listed some of those available through Black Dog Institute that are all free and available through our website. And we're all getting, so there's fact sheets around coping with COVID and also caring for your loved ones. There's a really fantastic suite of resources around COVID and managing anxiety during this time. There's also a range of self-help tools. I think this is all throwing everyone into kind of the online world. So luckily we have a lot of face-to-face programs, but while we can't deliver those, we're encouraging people to get on board and jump onto some of our online offerings. So we have a program called My Compass, which is to help manage mild to moderate stress, anxiety and depression. And so that's something worth looking into as well. We also have an online clinic that's free and anonymous that you can jump online to, and it will provide, based on what you're experiencing, a range of different support options. And we also have, for those who are looking to kind of find out more and understand more about mental health, we have a range of education programs that are free and available online, and webinars and podcasts and a range of series. We also have some lived experience presenters, an amazing team who go out into the community to share their stories of what it's like living with depression or anxiety and how they're managing during this time. So there's a range of resources there that I'd encourage you to have a look at if it's of interest to you. And of course, if anyone is experiencing a really tough time and hasn't sought help, a conversation with a GP is something that we of course recommend. So I'll wrap up there, and I'm very sorry because I understand my internet connection hasn't been fantastic. I'll finish there for now. I'll end this slideshow, Josh, and then I'll hand it over to you and I can take questions, hopefully.
Thanks, Sarah. Does anyone have any questions?
It's Ben. I've got a question. Can I leap in?
Go for it.
Sarah, thank you so much for your presentation. I guess a statement before a question. I think it was one of our former colleagues, John Hart, who stood up at the technical official dinner a year ago, probably about exactly, and said he hadn't been all right. And good on him for saying that put in place, I think, conversations that led to Swimming New South Wales, I understand, reaching out to you and the team to lead this. So I think I'd just like to acknowledge perhaps John as being a key person brave enough to kick off this piece of work, and good on you and Swimming New South Wales for picking it up. So thank you. My question is around we as a body and the way that we train people. At the moment, all technical official training is very technical. It's very much on the hard skills of how do you time keep, how do you judge strokes. And we don't do anything in the soft skills area around interpersonal relationships, dealing with conflict and that sort of stuff. And I think sort of mental health is part of that. I'm sure you work with lots of groups that work in similar ways. How can you put issues like this center stage and actually introduce them into the mainstream education program? I mean, you put a lot of resources out there, but do you have any thoughts about how we could actually bring this into the mainstream of technical official education?
Yeah, it probably, thank you again, and it is wonderful to hear about John putting his hand up, because I'm sure he's not alone, and it's really wonderful for him to do that, because it did start the ball rolling. So we're really glad to be engaged now and here. In terms of, like you said, that the training has focused on more those technical skills. There is a range of training, say for example, that Black Dog does. Maybe taking a step back, I think it's really important to think about, as an organisation, your kind of vision and your mission and your values, and how can that guide your interactions and your day-to-day. And then as part of that, then if thinking about then, well, what training and support can we offer that fits in with that, with us actually achieving as an organisation and achieving, living and breathing our values, our vision, our mission. So it actually does extend outside of those technical skills and training. There is a range of training and programs available. And I think it's really important to listen to the volunteers and the technical officials around what their needs are and what they would like. I think there are a range of training around mental health literacy, so kind of understanding what it can be like for someone experiencing a mental health issue, and I think, and how to have conversations and respectful conversations, and kind of encouraging breaking down of that stigma. So I think mental health literacy as a foundational component is really important, and it's really about supporting team members and people who are obviously doing well, mentally. They can contribute more, engage more, and stay, on board for longer. And so that's a good outcome for everybody. So I guess in a roundabout way, I think it's coming back to the values of your organisation, and thinking more broadly around the kind of community and support that you want to provide for each other, and kind of prioritising that kind of that kind of community engagement side and support.
Thank you, Sarah. Very good.
Sarah, sorry, is that you, Josh? Josh, it's Faye.
Yep.
I've noticed that Anthony's asked a couple of questions in the chat.
Yes, I was just going to see, before I do read them out, I was just going to see if anyone else had questions. Just remember though, you're all on mute, so just unmute yourself if you do have one, and I'll give you a chance to do that first.
So, Josh, it's Dave. Just a quick question. Where is Swimming New South Wales with as far as implementing these recommendations?
It's been talked about briefly, but I haven't really been a part of those conversations at the moment, so I couldn't give you too much detail. But I believe the board has discussed it to some extent so far. But I mean, we've got to start with. We have the results, or the basically summary of those results up on our website at the moment, that Sarah just took us through, and I think we're looking to go a bit further from there. But just in terms of specifics, I don't know at this stage. I think there could be a couple of our board members actually in the chat today. So if they have anything to share, that would be great. I'm not sure if they're here though at the moment.
Janelle's here. Can you hear me?
Janelle, yes. Hey, Janelle.
Yep. Hi. So all I wanted to say is, yes, we did discuss it. Our last meeting, we decided that it would be a time frame of during the next 6 to 12 months. And again, that's been interrupted by COVID. So the whole idea now is to hopefully gain some insight from you guys from this forum and from the questions that you're asking today. We believe we know what's important is things like the communication, definitely, and creating more transparency around your official nominations and appointments, and to improve the introduction and reiteration of the values and that sort of thing, and the things that Sarah mentioned in relation to delivering more training around grievance management and going over our policies and procedures to make sure that they are up to date and that they are current for today's conditions. So yes, we're definitely moving forward with it. We do plan to continue to gain information from you as we go. And we are trying to get the TSC particularly to be the drivers of the next stage. And we will be talking to the TSC about after this particular forum to see where we go next. But we'll keep the Black Dog Institute on board, and we'll definitely be talking to the TSC and gaining some more information so we can actually achieve something out of this survey so that we can provide that assistance and support for you.
Does that answer your question, Dave, or does anyone have any questions off that?
Yeah, it answers the question. Janelle, to you, will the board keep us informed as to where they're going with this, or will it just go along and one day we might hear something?
Janelle,
You're on mute.
Sorry, I thought I had unmuted. Thanks for that. Sorry about that. We'll definitely be keeping in touch and keeping you up to date on where things are at.
And let me know when I want him up. Might be today, eh?
So we'll be definitely keeping you informed about what's happening, because part of the thing that we have come across obviously is the transparency and the communication side of things. So we'll be certainly working hard to continue that and improve that, and hopefully through the TSC we'll keep in touch with you and let you know. And we want you to let us know how we're going as well. So
just a general comment to everybody.
Thanks, Janelle. Oh, sorry, Ben.
Yeah, just saying, I think we all know we don't need to wait for board resolutions and policy and procedures upgrades to have conversations between ourselves. But obviously having sort of overall support and a framework that enables that helps. In other words, you know, we don't need to wait for boards to make decisions. We can start having these conversations as part of what we do generally anyway.
Yeah, and I think that's what kind of came through from me with my interactions with Swimming New South Wales. This is kind of a first step to the process, and I think a lot of collaboration, you know, amongst you all as a group and with the board and everybody to come up with solutions and ways forward is going to be important. I don't think with any kind of, program of this size, there's quick fixes. It's things around, what can we do now? What needs to be prioritised now? And then over time as well, what can you look to introduce and build upon?
Thanks, Sarah. Oh, sorry, we had another question.
Yeah, I've got a question. Just one slightly different, a bit more looking outward. One position that as officials, we're often in the position to be able to see behaviour in those around us, the kids, etc. Are there opportunities where we can learn to, I guess, keep an eye out for good mental health with the people that we're working with in terms of the kids?
Yeah, yes, absolutely. And that is some of the training that we have available through Black Dog Institute. And I think we've been delivering training at the moment via webinars, these interactive online kind of forums, because one of the other challenges at the moment is you're not seeing people face to face as well. So you don't have all those usual cues. So the opportunity to isolate becomes even easier. So we do have a range of programs that address that. How do you stay connected? How do you, keep that contact and keep that connection with the people around you, whether that's work or home? And how, because that's one of the key things around mental health is you can observe changes. And that's when you can intervene and provide that support. But sometimes through these formats, it's harder to provide that and notice that support. So it's certainly kind of trying to understand. One of the things, we do at work now is we keep an eye on are people turning up to those meetings that they're supposed to be at, or is there differences, are people not engaging in the kind of activities that they would normally be engaging in, and just kind of then making concerted efforts to reach out and make proactive connections with people and checking in on how they're doing, I think is really important, particularly during this time.
Okay, thank you.
Sarah, we had one question from Anthony. You mentioned, so one of the results of the focus groups was, or from the survey, was that people at some stages were not experiencing respectful interactions. The question from Anthony was, did the focus groups explore where that was happening, like specifically, or was it maybe just at meets specifically, or was it in different situations?
Yeah, no, it didn't. I'm trying to recall now, because it didn't come up in one area, it came up in a few different areas, which made it a bit of a theme. And in terms of, and it seemed to be different in terms of if it was between peers or if it was between, superiors, or, yeah, it came up in different formats. There wasn't a strong theme around it. Was it in a particular area or particular group versus group? And it didn't come up a huge amount, but it came up enough for us to say, oh, this does seem like an issue for some people.
Yep, sure. Thank you. Now, I temporarily lost access to the chat, so I don't know if there were any more questions a bit higher up or anything. So if anyone has any more questions, please ask, because that's the only one that I had.
Oh, I can see one that's come up from Anthony. Is it downhearted while volunteering? So when I talked about, we did find a proportion of the respondents saying that they felt downhearted for some of the time. It wasn't about, we didn't ask that in response to your experience while volunteering. It was your broad experience in general life.
Thank you. I knew there was another one from Anthony, so thanks for that. Any more from anyone, whether it's to do with their specific experiences or, officiating, maybe it's officiating at the New South Wales meets like a lot of you do, or if it's something that might happen regionally or at a club level, anything that Sarah may be able to answer. Okay, I think that's about it. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you very much for the presentation.
Thank you for your time, and I've really loved my experience today engaging with Swimming New South Wales, with the staff that I've talked to, with the volunteers that I've engaged with, and hearing about all the passion and commitment across your whole group. It's been really lovely to engage, and so thank you so much for the opportunity.
No dramas. Thanks, Sarah. And if you do have any other questions for Sarah, just shoot them through to myself in an email and I can pass them on to Sarah and get back to you each individually. So if you know there's something that does come up later in the day or across the weekend, just send me an email, and Sarah will be happy to help. So so thanks for the questions, everyone, and the discussions. We'll probably have a bit of a break now. I think Lydia was on at, just checking, I think 11. And we finished, 10:45, so that's perfect. So everyone back before 11, or a couple of minutes before, and we should be right to go with our next presentation. So thanks everyone. Thanks again, Sarah, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Okay, see you. Bye.
Thanks, Sarah.
Thank you.
Okay, everyone, you're welcome to have a break and just pop back just shortly before 11.
Okay. Can everyone see that, John?
I can see that. That's great. Thank you.
Can everyone see it clearly? Do you need me to make it bigger or?
Yeah, if you could go to the if you go into the slideshow tab at the top. Yeah,
at the
just
bottom.
to start it off.
They're just at the bottom, I think.
Oh yeah, well, there is one at the bottom. Yeah, that'll do it as well.
I'm clicking it, but it's not doing. Oh, here we go. It's just warming up. I don't know why it's taking so long.
Okay.
So,
We'll just wait one more minute. Oh, great. That's perfect. Yeah.
Is that good for everyone? Can everyone see that?
Yeah, looking good. We'll just wait one more minute, and I've just got a couple of other things to say prior to you starting. But thanks. Lydia.
Sure. And you can hear me all right and everything?
Yeah. Yeah. No
okay,
dramas.
Beautiful. All right. That should be fine.
The sunshine in Brisbane. We are also covering meetings in Sydney and Melbourne. Winter racing is in full swing at Royal Randy, and it's Living Legends Race Day at Flemington, where Melbourne Cup winning jockey Michael Rod makes his return after a 5-year stint in Singapore. Relax and enjoy all that racing has to offer, live and free on 7. Good morning, everybody. Bruce always sets it up so brilliantly. Eagle Farm True Brisbane Racing with us on. Some of the great horses of yesteryear being celebrated. We'll bring you some of the runs that captured our hearts and imagination. So thanks for joining us. Enjoy Saturday afternoon racing, and it's a pleasure to introduce a 2-time Group 1 winning trainer and from Sunday the Casterton Cup winner. Welcome to you, Henry Byer. Thanks for having me, Haim. Good time had by all at Casterton. Now, you didn't tell us you were going to win the Casterton Cup last Saturday. That's what you're winning tomorrow. Yeah, minor oversight there, Haim.
Okay. It looks like pretty much everyone's back in, so we can get started again. Just a couple of things really quickly before Lydia starts her presentation. So welcome back, everybody. If you have any comments, by the way, on or feedback on today's webinars, whether that be questions or from a specific presentation or just overall feedback, just shoot me an email. That would be really appreciated. We'd also love to include a few comments on the day in our TO newsletter, which is now quarterly, so 4 times per year. The next one's scheduled to be released, I think, on Tuesday. So in your email, if you're happy for your review or comments to be potentially included, let me know, and you might get lucky. You might be in the newsletter. So just make sure the email gets to me by the end of the weekend. So our next guest presenter is Lydia Dowse, the Head of Integrity and Risk at Swimming Australia. To some, these terms might seem uninteresting and dour, okay, but you'll be surprised how much it relates to TOs in their role on or around pool deck. So Lydia is going to give us an insightful chat on what roles and responsibilities TOs hold. So over to you, Lydia.
Thank you very much, Josh. Lovely to see you all. I hope you can see my PowerPoint presentation. I'm going to go through that rather than you seeing me speak. I am coming to you from hospital. So if a nurse comes in with a shot of morphine for me, don't be alarmed. I'll just mute myself for a second and then come straight back to you. So look, I really enjoyed meeting some of you at last year's conference in Canberra. I think I learnt a lot about technical officials and what you do, the role you play in swimming, and I was very interested in some of the more technical aspects of the sport, I guess, and I really look forward to attending another one in the future and meeting you again face to face rather than on the screen. But today I wanted to talk to you about my role and how it impacts on your role as technical officials. So I work out of the Melbourne office, and I am in charge of all matters relating to integrity in our sport. They can be basically summarised in 3 key areas. One is safe sport and behaviour. So safe sport, meaning protection of children, protection of each other, the use of alcohol, the way we use media and social media. Any behavioural related matters come to me. Anti-doping and related matters such as supplements use and illicit drugs. And finally, and this one's becoming more of an issue as the years pass, race fixing and also corruption in sport and any issues relating to gambling in swimming. And I'll come to that a bit later. Just for your information, Australia is now setting up a new national body called Sport Integrity Australia. It's going to be a big bureaucracy, and it will bring together all of the components of corruption, anti-doping and safe sport into one big bureaucracy in Canberra. And the new head of Sport Integrity Australia, the new CEO, is David Sharp, who's come across from ASADA to head up the new body. So I think Australian sport is certainly seen as a leader and doing as much as it can to prevent corruption and other integrity issues in sport. Now, you may not know, and it's probably because you wouldn't turn your mind to this issue particularly, but there are some policies that do apply to technical officials. Those policies are what I'm going to talk to you about today. And I'm going to try not to sound like a lawyer. I'm going to try and show you how the policies apply to you as technical officials and for you to start familiarising yourself with these policies. I will say that all of our policies are currently under review, meaning that every few years we look at them and we update them. But the basic thrust and principles of what are in the current policies will be in the new policies anyway. So I'm just going to talk to you about some of the principles and some of the rules that apply to you. Child protection is without doubt our number one priority in swimming. A lot of children and young people play our sport. We work in and around them. You as technical officials, when you are at events, see children and young people everywhere. They are the people we care about the most as a sport. And when I say we, I mean everybody involved in our sport. Just so you can understand how this might be relevant to you, last year I had 30 complaints relating to the way a child was treated, ranging from bullying to criminal behaviour. 4 of the cases ended up being heard in the criminal courts. We've had sex offender convictions and some custodial sentences as well handed down to coaches. So all of the matters that have come to me in relation to children have related to coaches, not to technical officials. I've never had a case, and as far as I am aware, there's never been a case relating to a technical official, but all of the cases have related to coaches. Because you are close to children, I think it's useful for you to know some of the rules and some of your responsibilities. On our website, we have the Safe Sport Framework, which addresses the environmental factors which contribute to child abuse. It sets the standards of behaviour of our sport. It sets out the procedures for dealing with complaints. And it also provides a whole lot of advice and guidance and tools which we send out to clubs for dealing with issues as and when they arise. And the good thing from my perspective is that all complaints come to me or to Swimming Australia, and people in clubland know that. So they know if there's an issue that they might need to deal with, then they ring me. And I would say if you see something that you think doesn't look right, you can ring me too. Swimming is a sport that's seen as one that has best practice in regards to the safeguarding of children. And the reason for that is because we've had many issues over the years relating to children. We are a unique sport in that the child-coach relationship is very close, and the hours in which our children are at the pool are the hours when a lot of people are not there. So there are higher risks, if you like, in the environment in which our sport operates. The other issue, I think, is like gymnastics, swimmers are in clothes or in gear, if you like, in training gear or what have you, which it doesn't cover the body. It allows a person to see the body in its full shape. And other sports, like for example cricket, where the body is almost completely covered. So that is a risk factor as well. We are also currently reviewing the Safe Sport Framework, and we're actually going to make it into a document which will be specifically related to child safety. At the moment, it also relates to member protection, that is complaints from adult to adult about other matters, but we're going to divide those into two documents. But that's just for your interest, and those documents will be up on our website in the coming months once approved by the board. So the Safe Sport framework applies to everyone in our sport, but it does specifically apply to people in positions of authority, and officials are included in that group. So as a person in position of authority, you are required to comply with the rules in the Safe Sport framework. And a participant is everyone who participates in our sport, and you don't actually have to be a member for the Safe Sport framework to apply to you. So you can be caught under it even if you're not a member of a club. If a child is, say, verbally abused at one of our, participating in our sport in any way, then that matter could possibly come up to me. The thing about child safety is it applies to everybody, that everyone has a role to play, that we all need to keep our eyes open and to report things that we feel don't look quite right. And to understand that we now live in a society which has changed, that what people see or what they think they see, they will report these days. I do understand that 99% of the time, most people involved in our sport have good intentions in relation to children. But for the 1% that don't, we need to find ways to minimise risk. And one of the main ways is to have rules which separate people in positions of authority from children in a safe way. So, some of the very basic rules in the Safe Sport framework is the way that we touch children. So in swimming, for example, any physical contact with children or young people must be appropriate to the delivery of the service. So if you were fitting goggles onto a child, for example, or showing a child the correct technique of how to do freestyle, that would be, from a coach's perspective, perfectly all right. I had a complaint a few years ago where a person saw a coach standing behind the blocks with a young girl on the block, and she was in the diving position and he was standing directly behind her, holding onto her hips and looking at her. The person making the complaint saw what she thought was something sinister. It turned out through the complaint that the coach was showing an athlete with cerebral palsy how to dive into the pool. and without holding on to the child would have fallen into the pool. And so sometimes what people see is not actually what is occurring, but nevertheless, it's better to be safe than sorry. So any investigation that we carry out can sometimes have a happy ending for all, but at the same time, I'd rather that than not knowing. So if you see something that you think looks suspicious or odd, don't be afraid to pick up the phone and give me a call. Some of the other rules are obviously not touching children in their private parts, don't make any sort of sexual connotation with touching, no corporal punishment, no horseplay, you don't need to assist them with toileting, and obviously the only time that you might touch a child is if they're injured, and the law allows you to do that. If you see a child who's injured, your natural instinct would be to rush over and help them. You might be asking yourself, well, what's that got to do with me? I'm a technical official, but it is possible that you might see a child in distress at some point, and you need to know what your rights and responsibilities are. The basic and fundamental rule is adhering to boundaries, and many complaints do originate here. So what I would say to you is just do your job as a technical official. That's your job. And it's the same with coaches. Do your job as a coach and don't do any more. You can't drive a child home without their parent and the club or another official knowing that that's what you're doing and the route that you will be taking. Don't try and engage with a child on text or messaging. Don't go to a private function unless, of course, you know the child and the family as friends. So don't try and act like a friend, because actually you're not. You're a technical official, and you need to be professional in the way that you go about things. I'll give you a couple of examples of cases the last couple of years. One where a parent was driving home and saw the coach in his car with one of the young swimmers and contacted me and thought that it was inappropriate that he be in the car with a young girl who was a swimmer at the club. And again, after investigation, it was determined that the parents had asked the coach to drive the child home, and the coach had advised the parents of when he would be arriving and what route he would be taking home, so that there was some communication, some understanding that this was going to happen, and that it was done in a way that the parents felt that the child would be safe. And in those circumstances, that can be permissible, but certainly it would be against the rules or in breach of the rules if you were simply to just drive a child home without the parents and preferably another official or a person from the club, like the president, for example, of the club, knowing that that's what you're doing. Another case involved an assistant coach of a club who sent lots of texts and not sexual photos, but photos to a young girl at the club. He was convicted in the Magistrates Court of grooming and is now on the sex offenders register for the next 8 years. So things like that are taken very seriously. He had about a year and a half of trying to contact a young girl and befriend her. She was 12 and he was 45. So again, be very careful around the use of texts to children and communication to children. Other rules relate to how you speak to kids. Obviously, there's a degree to which you might direct them to one place and tick them off if they're not going where they're supposed to go, but but be careful of the language that you use. Don't use excessive language, don't use sexual language, don't use inappropriate language to children, don't give gifts to children. As I've mentioned, visual media, photos, videos, texts, anything like that, be very careful. Don't go near change rooms. Change room arrangements are difficult in swimming because we it's often said to me that we don't have enough change rooms for the different groups that we might have. But obviously don't be in a change room one-on-one with a child. Never get undressed where a child is present. And if you, if it's possible, have a change room for technical officials only. Obviously, use, possession or supply of alcohol and drugs, you'll find yourself expelled from the sport. So they're rules in relation to children. I put them first because, as I said, they're our #1 priority. They're the thing that's the thing we care about absolutely the most. But there are other issues which I think, if we can move away from child protection for a moment and talk about member protection. And member protection is basically adult to adult conduct. So how you, as technical officials, treat each other and other members of the swimming community. Now, technical officials, from what I understand and what I've heard, are under a pressure environment. You have to get it right. You are under pressure to do your job well. You have an order of command. People are relying on you to get all aspects of the sport of swimming correctly refereed, if I can use that word in a general term, and that all results and everything that you do is of critical importance so that the sport can be run in a professional way. So you are critically important to the running of our sport. And I'd imagine that under that environment, there's going to be some tension from time to time. And so it is more difficult when you're in that environment to treat each other with respect and courteousness and be professional at all times, because there are times when the pressure, I'd imagine, and I don't just imagine it because I've received reports, can be so great that sometimes people lose their cool and they can be accused of bullying or a harassment or something like that. So I simply urge you to read our code of conduct, which is really just about saying, remember to be mindful of how you treat each other as adults in our sport. And that can be how you treat parents, how you treat other members of the swimming community, how you treat adult athletes, etc., how you treat coaches. But certainly I do understand that this is probably more fundamental to technical officials and all the people who are involved on event day to be mindful of how we treat each other as we go about our work. So gambling and anti-race fixing. Now, most people are surprised that you can place a bet on swimming. At the 2016 Olympic Games, $75 million was bet on swimming races. And at last year's World Championships, $13 million was bet on swimming races. Well, they're all swimming races. Just to be aware that there is a market out there for betting, and these are just these amounts are just the ones that we know of. These are the legal amounts. So the black market, we don't know. We can't trace that, but those are the legal bets that you can place on swimming. Some of these betting what do they call companies? Betting companies are the companies that you can look at if you want to have a look at what you can, out of interest, what who's opening a market for swimming races? Well, these are some of the companies that do that. So, and they do it in Australia. So there's different types of bets that you can place on swimming races. So most of the bets are money line bets or straight up bet, that is predicting who will win the race. Punters can also make other bets like what's the fastest time or the fastest lap. And this makes betting more exciting in swimming because you can sort of have multiple different types of bets. And at the moment, we do know that there are betting markets other than the Olympic Games and the FINA World Championships, but you can also bet on the Commonwealth Games and the new International Swimming League, which began last year. At the last year's, 2016 Olympics, you could also bet on heats as well as the finals. So there's a whole range of bets you can place on swimming, and it's becoming a larger and more exciting and appealing sport for the black market, and I'll get to that shortly. There's another type of bet called court siding, which is generally a tennis problem or a basketball problem, but it's the practice of transmitting information from sporting events directly from the event to a person outside of the stadium. So a spectator usually sends the result of the next point, and you can see that in tennis. So the next point is going to be 15:30, and there's a gap between the actual occurrence of that next point and the television broadcast or the streaming. And in that 10 or 15 seconds, someone can place a bet. And you might have seen that in tennis, some people have been removed from the stadium for being involved in what they call court siding. It happens in horse racing quite a bit. It happens in soccer, but tennis is the one that seems to have caught this the most, because something is happening every few seconds really in tennis. But applying that logic, some of our events are streamed live here in Australia. Australian Championships, the Age Championships, Pan Pacs, short course para Pan Pacs, etc. And we have about, as I understand, about an 8-second delay. So there is a risk that someone we don't know out there is offering bets on some of our national events. And we work with a company to do some investigation into whether or not pool siding is occurring. These are all the sorts of risks. When you think about betting on sporting events, we do know that it's getting bigger all the time. In fact, during the coronavirus, betting at home and on the phone has gone through the roof, sports betting, because it gives someone, gives people something to do. And so we do know that the risk is getting greater, and they estimate around $2 trillion worldwide was bet on sporting events last year. So we have to be mindful of the risk to our sport. So our athletes are in some ways prime candidates for being approached to fix races. And why is this? We do know through the National Integrity of Sport Unit that the illegal betting syndicates, mostly in Asia, are already looking at swimming. They're already involved. We also know that our athletes are either sub-elite, well, they are sub-elite, generally speaking, which means they don't earn that much money, and they're young, and often they can be at risk of being induced to slow down in a race just by simply starting off with giving them a new iPhone. and then it goes from there. Swimming is, generally speaking, an expensive sport to be in, and so more incentive to take some cash from someone who's willing to give it to you on the basis that you throw a lap. And I said before, swimmers don't get paid very much, and we do now know that different types of bets can be placed on a swimming event. So again, you might be sitting there thinking, well, that's all very well, but how does it affect me as a technical official? And the answer to that is that as a technical official, some of you will have inside information because you can see what's happening in the marshalling areas and on pool deck. And particularly in those marshalling areas, you can see, for example, if a swimmer was ill. Let's say a swimmer was throwing up before a race. That's the sort of information that you could quite happily give to a betting syndicate, knowing that that swimmer was unlikely to swim well. You might overhear something someone said and be able to pass that on to a betting syndicate. So you are at risk of also being induced through gifts or money to provide inside information to people who seek to manipulate the outcome of our races. So you are subject to our gambling and anti-race fixing policy. As a technical official, you can't bet on a swimming event where an Australian swimmer is competing. You can't communicate inside information to another person. So if you see something that you think would be of use to a punter outside or a betting syndicate, you can't pass that on. You can't accept gift or money from another person to provide information. And if you see another person doing something like that, you are obliged under the rules to provide that information to me. Now, that's a policy. That's what you're obliged to comply with under the rules. But equally, match fixing is a crime under Australian legislation. So not only will you potentially be in trouble with me, scary as that sounds, but you could also find yourself prosecuted under the criminal justice system. Other rules, just briefly, that you are required to comply with. We have a media policy which requires you not to make comment, particularly negative comment about Swimming Australia or our team or swimming stakeholders and sponsors. Some of you may have met Kate Hutchison, who's our media manager. So if you have any questions about media, if anyone approaches you to make a comment, she's the person to speak to. We also have a social media policy, and this is the one where a lot of young athletes get in trouble with. You understand they're on every type of social media platform there is. And why wouldn't they be? They have a lot of fun with it. They promote themselves, their sport. We love it that they do that. But it has to be appropriate and responsible and thoughtful and ethical. So you can't post information about Swimming Australia that might be sensitive or inappropriate or damaging to the reputation of our sport. And just remember that when you use social media, it stays with you forever. So it's what we say to our athletes, you know, you use social media, you think you won't be remembered for it, but people remember these things forever, even when you take the post down. So it can be quite damaging. I don't think technical officials, generally speaking, would find themselves in trouble with these policies, but you know, just from an awareness point of view, I think it's important for you to know. We do allow responsible consumption of alcohol for people on teams, including technical officials. Sometimes we do have a no alcohol rule if it's a junior meet, but that will be up to the team member to advise you of that. But generally speaking, responsible consumption of alcohol is permitted in our sport by adults, and that would include people involved in the technical official side of our sport. And obviously illicit drugs is a no-no. It's prohibited. If you see a swimmer or a coach or someone using illicit drugs, I'd appreciate it if you could inform me, because we take it, it is against our policy, but we take it more from the point of view of looking after the health and welfare of people involved in our sport. So if any breach occurs of any of our policies, generally what happens, I receive a formal complaint from someone, an investigation takes place, it's confidential. We do allow the person against whom the complaint is made to have their say. It's, we operate within a framework of natural justice. So sometimes the complaint is upheld, sometimes dismissed. The CEO of Swimming Australia has the ultimate discretion to impose the penalty, and there is a right of appeal. So if you do find yourself involved in some sort of complaint, do understand that we will treat you with respect. You are not immediately guilty or anything like that. It's more a process that we go through to get to the truth, so that we can deal with the matter fairly. There's a range of penalties available. The most important penalty, and the one that is used most often, is undertaking further education, because sometimes people are completely unaware that what they did was wrong. So a breach of a social media policy, as an example, there's lots of education that we can provide. There's lots of providers out there that will assist our swimmers or our coaches or our technical officials, whoever it might be, to understand better what they did wrong. And we will often use the requirement or the penalty of having to undertake further education as the number one penalty. We can require a verbal or written apology to be given. We can provide a written warning. We can require someone to attend some counselling to get some better self-awareness of their behaviour, and that often takes place in member protection matters, where it's adult v adult. They get a better understanding of perhaps the way they come across to other people. We can demote a technical official or relocate them or give them another role or activity. We can suspend a technical official, or in the worst case scenario, terminate the technical official, or if it's a very serious matter, and as I say, I've never had one with a technical official, but obviously we are bound to report serious criminal matters to the police and other authorities. But as I said at the beginning of my presentation, you know, our volunteers, the people involved in our sport are fantastic. They put in incredible hours of work, and my role is really to deal with the 1% that go astray, that are in there for the perhaps the wrong reasons, or that don't know the rules, or that use swimming for other means. And with those sort of people, they soon find themselves in a disciplinary situation, or worse still, in the criminal justice system. So, but I think it's important that for technical officials, you know that these rules are there. Our policies are on our website. They are being updated, and we will happily share the new policies when they come through. The new policies will just be more up to date, probably clearer in the way they've been written, and a bit more user friendly. But if you have any questions at all, please email me. Feel free to give me a call. I'm very happy to share information on this sort of stuff, because the more people who know about integrity in sport, the better our sport will be to fight the problems that come our way. So thank you for giving me the time today to talk. And if you have any questions now, I'm happy to answer them for you.
Thanks, Lydia. That was fantastic. We've had a few questions come through on the chat. So I'm just trying to find, well, one of them was from Anthony. You just mentioned then that giving you a call, like to give you a call or send you an email.
Sure.
What is the exact reporting process? Is that the way it goes, or do we go through, people would go through their club's MPIO officer, for instance, or what's the best way to go about it?
Yep. So for all child protection matters, they come straight to me. For everything else, you can start with me if you want to. Sometimes I will delegate the matter down to a state level or a club level. Depends on the seriousness of the complaint. Member protection matters are often dealt with at club level. And often they'll ring me just to say, look, what do you think about the way we're going about this? Is this the right process? And I'll help them. Same with our state bodies. But so everything can be dealt with at a more local level, except for child protection and serious criminal matters. So if it's a serious criminal matter, it'll come to me. But it just depends a little bit on the nuance of the complaint as to whether it's something that is better dealt with by the state or the club. Yeah. But
Okay.
you can come in the first instance if you want.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. No, that's great. Just in terms of child protection, when you spoke about that at the start, we had a question from Olivia. Where you mentioned children and young people. What is the actual age definition of children and young people? So there was thought that child was 15 and under, and young person 16, 17, or there could be a bit different, your definition.
Yeah, good. Everyone asks me this question. There's no real answer to that. A child is a child from the moment they go into a pool, so it could be very young, we sort of look at the age of consent, and the age of consent is in most states around 16. I think in Tasmania and South Australia it's 17. But then I do consider young people to still be 18, 19, and possibly even 20. So it depends on the situation, but sometimes, because I know that sounds unsatisfactory to a lot of people, you should have a cut-off date, but for a lot of people, their immaturity, their life experiences means that we can deal with them even when they're 17 or 18 or 18 or 19 rather, under the child safe policy or the safe sport policy, because a young person is just a young person, and we can determine whether it's dealt with under this policy or member protection. But if, for example, we have a coach who is, say, let's say 35, and the athlete is, say, 18, there's no problem with the age of consent, but there is a problem with the imbalance of power in that situation. That a young person who may be a swimmer under the influence of a person in a position of authority, being her coach, for example, that can be dealt with under the Safe Sport framework, because the coach is really acting outside his boundaries, even though the swimmer is able to give legal consent. A bit tricky, isn't it? But that's, we want our people in positions of authority to stick to their boundaries of what they're doing and not to engage in relationships with young people.
Okay, thank you. Quite a few more questions in the chat. If anyone has the microphone available to ask, that would be great, because I don't want to miss anyone's question here. But there were a few, so I'm just going to read out a couple.
Yeah, sure.
So Robert had asked what happens if you did mention that we could go to you in the first instance, regardless of the reporting procedure. What happens if you're not available? Does Swimming Australia have a formal email address for complaints?
Yes, it's integrity@swimming. Let me just check this. It's integrity at swimming.
.org.au, I assume.
.org.au, yeah.
Yeah.
So yes, you can go through that or to me directly.
Okay, perfect. So another one. Just there's been quite a few though. So if anyone wants to interject and ask their question via audio, that would be fantastic. Another question for Robert: what is the procedure to ensure procedural fairness? So, like, what tribunal does Swimming Australia refer an appeal to, and where is the policy on ensuring a person under investigation is provided the services of counselling?
Yep, very good question.
During the course. Yep.
Yep, very good question. So counselling is absolutely offered at the start to someone under investigation, as well as complainant, but most straight away to the person under investigation. So that's a given. And also procedural fairness. A new National Sports Tribunal is being set up at the moment under this new Sport Integrity Australia arrangement, and we're just looking at. We do have under our constitution the power to set up an ad hoc tribunal, which we've done. So we tend to use sports barristers and these sorts of people who give their time for free, as well as swimming experts, so people who may have been involved in the sport but have maybe retired from the sport, and they can be useful people to sit on a tribunal. And we may in fact use the services of the new National Sports Tribunal for an appeal. But that tribunal will be independent of Swimming Australia, obviously. So that's where the procedural fairness is locked in from the get-go, but if you do appeal, then there will be an avenue to appeal to a tribunal that is not connected to Swimming Australia.
Okay, another one from Amanda. So Amanda mentioned, so SAL have been named by the Royal Commission as an institution not yet to have joined the National Redress Scheme. Does SAL intend to join the scheme?
Yep, a lot of people asking this question. So our board has been doing its due diligence right from the start, has had all sports, and at this stage, no sport has yet joined the scheme. But in the next coming weeks, I think you'll find that Swimming Australia will make a decision, and I can't preempt that decision because it's not mine to make. It's going to be the board of Swimming Australia to make that decision, and that'll be made. It has to be made before the 30th of June. So I would say watch this space. And the other thing just to note is that all of the Olympic sports are working with the Australian Olympic Committee to find a way of responding to the scheme. So I suspect, although it's not, I can't say this with any certainty, but I think you'll find that the response will come from Olympic sports as a whole, or at least most of the big ones in the coming weeks.
Thank you. Now, does anyone have any further questions? I think there are a couple more. There's a few more coming through, but we will end up running out of time to actually go through them. But I can always, if someone was to email me, would I be able to pass these questions on to you, and I'll get back to them by yourself?
Yeah, that's probably the best way to go, Josh. If you're happy to pass them all on to me by email, then I can just answer them all and then send them back to Josh, and you can send them back to everyone. That's fine.
Okay then. Fantastic. Well, was there any more? We'll have one final question if anyone's got one via their audio. Otherwise.
Yeah. Hi, Josh.
Hey, Josh.
Oh yes. Lorraine. Yep.
Yeah.
Bob. Yep. Hello.
Yeah,
hey, guys.
how you going?
Yeah.
Just covering off the point on disability athletes. What's the parameters around where they're considered to be in that vulnerable group, or being considered a child within the complaint mechanism, because of older ones with certain disabilities can be certainly quite vulnerable and need some further extra protection you know, particularly when they're younger adults or even into their 20s?
Yeah, I think it's a really good question. We would be guided by the experts in that para field as to what, you know, whether it would be a member protection or a child protection matter. But we also acknowledge that the way they are, the way they are trained and the sorts of things that they would have in their day would be different from an able-bodied swimmer. So, you know, we'd be guided a little bit by, with some of the complaints that we have, we're guided by Paralympics Australia a little bit. They give us some guidance on how to deal with para athletes. I haven't had a lot of complaints in relation to them, but I've also had some complaints in relation to their behaviour towards each other, and that we deal with pretty sensitively with the people in our para program, and as well as Paralympics Australia. So yeah, I suppose they are treated slightly differently in terms of the care and responsibility we have to them, because they are, in a general sense, more vulnerable.
Okay. All right, thanks.
And sorry, just one final question, Lydia. I appreciate your time. You're sitting in hospital. So Andrew has just written, hi Lydia, if a technical official has a concern with regards to child protection, are we mandated to come through Swimming Australia or, you know, the club, or can the TO go directly to the State's Department of Community Service? Because he's gone on to say some TOs fall under compulsory mandatory reporters and as such are bound by those child protection regulations.
Yeah, you are. Yeah. So look, my advice to you would be to come to Swimming Australia first, because we'll be knocking on the door of those authorities anyway. And it's absolutely fine to tell, you know, the head of technical officials or the you know, the manager of the event, or the, you know, the president of the club or the state CEO. You can start that way, and then the message will come back up the chain to me anyway. So as long as you report it up the chain, then it will continue to go up to me, or you can ring me straight away. Be my strong advice. So yeah.
Thank you. Was there anything else? I will be putting, I'll just grab all of the questions from the chat anyway, and note who has written them, and we will get back to you, to everybody that's asked the question. So I've got a copy of all of that. I'm just trying to see if there's any more that can be answered relatively quickly, and we might go for another couple of minutes. And then I know we're returning at 12, but we might just push that to 12:05, so we have that 15-minute break as shown in the agenda. Just having another look at a couple of questions, but yeah, like I said, if anyone has asked a question and I haven't asked it yet, please yell out. Okay, so another one we've got here. What role, Lydia, what role does your team play in conducting audits of facilities where carnivals are held to ensure the physical safeties of, you know, TOs, athletes and spectators? So there's the example used was there's a large metal pole that's running across the ceiling at Homebush at Sydney Olympic Park, and, you know, what if something was to happen with that, you know, that fell into the pool? Is there something that you guys do in relation to this?
It's not my remit. I suspect it might come under the events team. They possibly would do an audit of the venue for the hosting of an event. But I mean, I could certainly put that one down in writing, and I can find out and come back to you.
Yeah, that'd be good. I think it's because it's very hard to go and do an audit of all venues that are used for swimming, because obviously there would be hundreds across the nation. But I don't know if that was more just a question for the larger venues, for the, you know, your state and national events. But yeah, to me, it would probably be, I guess, especially for state and national events, it'd be the events team.
I think so.
But yeah, I mean, it might be something that we could look at and try and get an answer. Cool. So I think that will do us, but be assured I'll send all of the questions to Lydia. So sorry if I didn't get to your question. So thank you very much, Lydia, for your presentation.
Pleasure.
Very well received, and there were lots of questions. So
that's good. That's fine. Look forward to answering them all.
okay, and yeah, so that's fine. I'll get all the questions to you, and to everybody else, we'll return at 12:05. Sorry, yeah, we'll go 12:05 return, and and Sherry will start not long after that with her multi-class swimming presentation. Thanks very much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lydia. Thanks, everyone.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, guys, we might get started. I think Sherry's ready to go. You all good, Sherry?
Yes, I am.
No problem. And I believe you'll be sharing your screen.
Yes, I'm going to try to share the screen. You've disabled it though.
Oh, yeah.
Yep. Let me know when it's ready to go.
Second.
I'd just like to say hello to everybody anyway, and wish you all a good afternoon. This is a bit strange for us to be holding a technical official forum this way, but I think it's going very, very well, and I think you'll all agree that the presentations from both Sarah and Lydia are extremely engaging and most informative. So I hope you've enjoyed those so far. I'm just going to be talking to you about multi-class. So I'm sure a lot of you have seen this presentation before, but for those of you that haven't, it's a very basic introduction to multi-class swimming. And then we're just going to go through a few slides to hopefully give you a better insight into multi-class swimming and to hopefully maybe engage you to participate at some of our meets. They're very rewarding meets, as most people that are here on the screens today will attest to. You get a lot out of those meets. So hopefully that's my goal today, and I hope I don't bore you too much. I'll try and keep it very brief. So when Josh is ready, you can...
Ready to go, Sherry. You can share.
Can you enable my screen then?
You can share now. I've enabled it, so you should be able to just share screen.
Okay, beautiful. Thanks, Josh. Okay.
Awesome. There it is.
Yeah. Can you all see that? I'm sure everyone's nodding. Anyway, I'll just talk anyway over the top of it. So, as I said before, I'll try and keep this presentation brief because for people that are not involved in multi-class swimming, it can be a little bit daunting and a bit confusing with all the numbers and classifications and letters, etc. But as I said before, hopefully I'll be able to make that not so daunting for you. And I hope that you'll take away something from this information and that you'll better understand our amazing multi-class athletes and the processes that they go through to get where they are, and how we as technical officials can best serve them in their quest to achieve. So multi-class swimming. Multi-class, referred to as MC swimming or World Para Swimming, WPS for short, is based on the FINA rules for swimming with the addition of codes of exceptions. And as the name would imply, this means exceptions to the mainstream rules of each swimming stroke. As officials, we must officiate by the rules, as always, and not by these codes of exceptions. The codes of exceptions are a guideline only and are there to assist you in your decision-making as an official. Multi-class athletes deserve the same treatment and respect as an able-bodied athlete. Multi-class athletes do not expect any special treatment with regard to the rules and how we apply and interpret them. As a matter of fact, they expect us to enforce the rules. That's why they train, that's why they're coached the way they are, and they expect us to enforce those rules to make it a fair playing field for all the athletes. So most competitions that you will officiate at will be conducted under the rules of either Swimming New South Wales, Swimming Australia, FINA, and incorporating the January 2018 World Para Swimming Rules and Regulations. The WPS Rules and Regulations Handbook 2018 to 2021 can be found on the website shown at the bottom of this screen for anyone that's interested. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the classification process that the athletes go through to get their classes so that they can compete. So a classification is carried out at special classification days by qualified classification experts. It is not our field and it is not anything that we are involved in. It is all done prior to us becoming involved with the athlete in the sport. Classification is used to place athletes of similar abilities or function into a group or class for the purpose of competition. And this is achieved by considering an athlete's medical conditions, their physical, sensory and cognitive attributes so that they can go and be classed into a group. Sorry, it can be grouped into a class. Makes more sense. So on your screen now, you'll see the current classification card that's issued by Swimming Australia to multi-class athletes. So at an able-bodied meet that has multi-class swimmers attending, the multi-class swimmer should bring this card to present to the referee before the commencement of their races so that their exceptions can be noted and thus they can be refereed accordingly. At multi-class only meets or state meets that incorporate multi-class events within the program, presenting the card to the referee is not essential as the promoting body would have already obtained the classifications and exceptions for all the competing athletes prior to the start of their meets. If, however, a multi-class swimmer presents themselves to you as the referee at one of these meets, thank them very much and note the exceptions in your program. The last thing we want to do is to discourage them from presenting their cards. If they go away thinking, oh, I don't have to do it, I don't have to do it, they'll end up going to a meet where they do have to do it and they won't. And they'll be, unfortunately, they'll be maybe penalised for that. So don't discourage them from showing you their card if they come to you. So basically, there are 16 classes or classifications that these athletes are grouped into. So now that they've been classified, we'll look at the classes that the athletes are placed into, which will help you understand, hopefully, the impairment of these swimmers. So as you can see on your screen, there are 16 class numbers. 1 to 10 indicates a physical impairment. Now, this is the highest range of numbers, and that is because there are as you can appreciate, there's so many levels of physical impairment to be considered from, say, missing limbs, short stature, cerebral palsy, deformities, etc. So that's why there's the 1 to 10 groupings in that class. So then you'll see 11 to 13, they're vision impaired. Once again, there are 3 levels of impairment taken into consideration, and that covers the mild to total. And then we have our 14, which is our intellectually impaired athletes. These athletes physically normally do not have anything physically wrong with them. So they have an intellectual impairment. 15 is a hearing impairment, and 16, very rare to see them, but they do compete with us, transplant athletes. So we're going to break it down even further now. So swimmers are given a class for each of the swimming strokes. Normally these are the same for all strokes of swimming, but sometimes they will differ depending on the nature of the athlete's disability, but it usually only differs in the breaststroke stroke. So free, back and fly are classed together as they require similar techniques when performing the stroke, and they use the letter S. Then there is SB, which is used to specify breaststroke swimming, as this can be using muscles and limbs that we don't possibly use as much in the other 3 strokes. And then we finish with the SM, individual medley, which usually matches with the S classification there. For a physical handicap, you can see here on the screen the difference between freestyle S10 and breaststroke S9, which would indicate to you that the swimmer probably has a lower body problem and is therefore not able to perform the breaststroke kick correctly, and so has a lesser class number, but only for that stroke. Moving on to the visually impaired swimmers, the 3 classes or levels of impairment here are from class 11, which have the lowest vision, through to class 13, who have the highest vision, although they are still medically classed as blind. The class 11 athletes will be required to wear blackened goggles unless they have prosthetic or no eyes, and must use tapper or tappers when they compete. Class 12 athletes are not as visually impaired as the class 11 swimmer, but they may choose still to use a tapper. Class 13 athletes are the least visually impaired, and they may also choose to use tappers. So as you can see from that previous slide, the swimmer with a visual impairment would have the same class number across all strokes, as this impairment would not impede their ability to physically swim any stroke. The only exception to this would be if the athlete had other disabilities other than sight impairment. So if the athlete's classification cards reads S11, SB11 and SM11, this would indicate to you that they would be required to wear blackened goggles and have tappers at each end of the pool if necessary. So the following classifications, S14, SB14 and SM14 on an athlete's card would tell you that they had an intellectual disability, that's the class 14. Therefore, they have no exceptions because they are physically able to perform all strokes as would an able-bodied swimmer. Once again, this would be dependent upon any other disability that the athlete has. However, if an athlete has more than one disability and therefore may have a second classification, you'll find that they will tend to swim under the lower class. In the case of having joined classes, they must indicate the class that they will be competing under when entering the competition, but this is a rare situation. Okay, so now that the swimmer have their classifications, which as mentioned before is used to place swimmers of similar function abilities into classes for the purpose of competition, we need to look at what part of the strokes they are exempt from performing in accordance with the rules and as a result of their disability. For this exercise, we use letters and numbers, which are called codes of exceptions. And as the name implies, this indicates to the official what part of the rule for each particular stroke they are either exempt from performing or at least attempting to perform. So the letters will indicate a starting exception and the numbers will indicate exceptions that they have while performing their strokes. So on your screen there, with our starting exceptions, we have the codes there. H, hearing impairment. A, assistance is required. B will tell you that the swimmer is unable to grip the backstroke start. Y is for a starting device. T indicates a tapper. And B, as we talked about, the blackened out goggles. And we'll go into those a little bit later in this presentation so that we'll break those down a little bit more for you. So during the swimming, the following codes will appear next to the swimmer's name, and once again, we'll break these down a little bit more in a couple of slides. So it's pretty obvious there what you can see. 0 is nil, so the athlete has no exceptions. A 1 will indicate to you that they have a one-handed start. 2 and 3 are for your breaststroke stroke. 2 is for a one-handed touch, and 3 allows a simultaneous intent to touch. 4 and 5 cover off the butterfly. Once again, 4 is a one-handed touch. A 5 will tell you that in butterfly the swimmer must show simultaneous intent to touch. 7 is only part of the upper body must touch. 8 and 9, right foot must turn out, left foot must turn out. Pretty simple. 12 is to show leg drag or to show intent to kick. And the plus sign, it lets you know that in butterfly, the athlete is able to perform the butterfly kick, but therefore becomes illegal during the stroke of breaststroke. So we'll break them down a little bit more for you here. Code H, the following may be required. A light, a signal or touch at the start from a support staff. They may require a strobe light that will be placed by the starter's stand or beside the relevant swimmer's block. Or they may have other signals that can be used, such as an arm gesture to indicate a start. You'll notice that this swimmer's class will be listed as a class 15 for hearing impaired on your program. If you, as a referee, see that you have a code 15 swimmer, a class 15 swimmer at the meet, please go and communicate with them or their coach or carer what, if any, extra starting signals they may require. Code A will indicate that the swimmer may require assistance at the start or finish. Swimmers with a code are entitled to support staff who will provide assistance at the start to either enter the pool or access the starting block prior to commencing their race, and or to assist exiting the pool at the end of their race. Swimmers, note please, swimmers are only allowed one support staff to assist them on the deck. Now a code E is unable to grip or backstroke start. And if a swimmer has a code E on their classification card or listed in the program, this is what it will tell you. They are unable to grip those backstroke grips. Therefore, they are entitled to hold the top of the starting platform or the touchpad at the start for their backstroke events. Code Y. Swimmers who have a Y code are entitled to use a starting device that has been approved prior to the event by the technical manager. And that's most important. Any equipment that the swimmers bring onto the deck for use in competition must be approved by the technical manager or technical director prior to their event. Such a device enables the swimmer to perform an effective start and may include such things as straps, cords, or even a towel that enables the swimmer to grip effectively for either backstroke or forward starts. T, as we've spoken about previously, a T code indicates that a swimmer with a visual impairment will require a tapper. The tapper shall indicate to the swimmer when they are approaching a turn or finish by tapping the swimmer at the appropriate distance with a single or double tap. Tapping devices are usually homemade, utilising a long pole and soft ends. And as I said, this, as in with other devices, this tapping pole must be approved by the technical manager prior to the swimmer's event. Tappers are compulsory for the S11 class swimmers. If a tapper is required, there must be a separate tapper at each end of the pool where necessary. We can't have, if the swimmer is doing a 100-metre event, they can't have one tapper running from the start to the finish from the turn to the finish, etc. They've got to have one tapper at each end of the pool. So code B refers to the class 11 visually impaired athlete, as it is compulsory for these swimmers to wear blackened goggles, and that is, of course, unless they have prosthetic eyes. It is usually the role of the judges of stroke to check the goggles of the class 11 swimmer as they leave the pool at the end of their races. As a referee of multi-class swimmers, please remember to ask your judges of strokes to carry out this task if necessary. And now we're going to look at the number codes that you may see against a swimmer's name on their card. And as this code would imply, there are no exceptions for the athlete who has the 0 code. No exceptions apply, and these swimmers must conform to all the rules of swimming indicated for the meet. You will usually see this against swimmers who do not have a physical disability, such as classes 14, 15 and 16, as they physically are capable of performing all strokes. Now, code 1 will indicate to you that the swimmer is unable to use the backstroke grips using both hands. They will place one hand on the grip, but the other hand may sit next to the gripping arm. It may be in the water, or it actually may be non-existent. Codes 2 and 3 refer to breaststroke swimming, as we talked about. So code 2 will indicate to you that the swimmer is allowed to touch at the turns and finishes with only one hand. However, the arm that is used to perform that stroke must be the arm that they use to touch at the turns and at the finish. And with that, the other arm may be dragged or stretched forward. So once again, code 3 during breaststroke, this will indicate that the swimmer needs to show simultaneous intent to touch with the other hand at the turns and the finish of the race. Both hands may not touch simultaneously, but the intent here is that they must show intent by both arms being stretched forward. So codes 4 and 5 refer to the butterfly stroke. Code 4, once again, like the breaststroke, will indicate to you that the swimmer is allowed to touch at the turns and finishes with only one hand. And that arm that is used to perform the stroke must be that arm that they use to touch at the turn and at the finish. The other arm, again, may be dragged or stretched forward. So code 5, during the butterfly stroke, this will indicate that the swimmer needs to show simultaneous intent to touch with the other hand at the turns and the finish of the race. And again, as in breaststroke, both hands may not touch simultaneously, but the intent must be shown by both arms being stretched forward. Code 7 will indicate that the swimmer may touch the wall at the turns or finish with any part of the upper body and will be deemed a legal touch. The touch for these athletes is usually with either the head or the shoulders, but can be any part of the body, upper body. So now we move on to the feet. So code 8 and 9 refer to the feet during breaststroke swimming. Code 8 relates to the right foot, which must turn out during the propulsive part of the kick, and a code 9 tells you that the left foot must turn out during the propulsive part of the breaststroke kick. And so an 8 and a 9 will indicate to you that either the left foot or the right foot, depending on their code, will probably either be straight, be non-existent, or definitely will not be turning out because they have an 8 or a 9 exception. So lastly, for the numbers during the swimming stroke, if you see a code 12, this will identify the swimmer who has leg drag or must show intent to kick with both legs. However, if the swimmer either starts, continues and finishes by either dragging the leg or legs or showing the intent to kick, they must continue to do that throughout the race. They cannot chop and change between the two. They must show consistency throughout the whole length. The tricky little plus code. So just before we go through some more specific rules and clarifications, we need to look at the code that has the plus sign. It does confuse a few people, but it is quite simple. Hopefully I'll explain it to you now. So this plus sign on a swimmer's card or printed in a program, it's more of an indicator to an official to flag that the swimmer is capable of executing a butterfly kick. Now, some of these swimmers with a plus will try and do it throughout their butterfly kick. And it is illegal, throughout their breaststroke kick, and it is illegal. The plus sign on a swimmer's card or in the printed program is only an indicator to you as an official rather than actually a code. And it means that they cannot perform a butterfly kick during breaststroke. Some of them will try to, and is a disqualifiable breach of the rules. Please remember though, that this does not refer to the start or terms where any swimmer is permitted to take a single butterfly kick at any time prior to that first breaststroke kick. So it's just an indicator to you as an official to watch out for that butterfly kick during breaststroke. They cannot do it. So we're just going to talk a little bit briefly now about some of the WPS rules and clarifications that you may find differs to the way in which we're used to officiating for able-bodied athletes. So we look at the start. So 11.1.2, when all athletes are stationary, the starter shall give the starting signal. So as you can see, there's nothing different there. This rule applies to any swimmer at the start of each and every race, including multi-class. 11.1.2.1, for an athlete with a vision impairment, on the long whistle from the referee, the athlete shall be permitted to orientate themselves prior to the starter's command. Now, this is vital when officiating multi-class swimming. The swimmers can take a very long time to orientate themselves, and the officials must show patience and not rush them, and that's especially relevant at the start of the race. Moving on to 11.1.2.2. An athlete with balance problems may require assistance at the start and may utilise a support staff member to aid them when orientating themselves for the start of a race. The support staff member can assist them to access the starting block and to maintain their balance, but they are not allowed to hold the swimmer beyond the 90 degrees or to give that swimmer any momentum at the start. Okay, 11.1.2.3. If an athlete only has one functioning leg, then they do not need to have a foot at the front of the starting block, but they must have one hand or some part of an arm at the front of that starting block. 11.1.2.9, this rule allows the swimmer to place a towel or similar on top of the block to prevent abrasion. However, the towel can only be one layer thick. Multi-class swimmers can start a race actually from several different positions. So as you can see on the screen, a normal position on the starting platform, sitting on the starting platform, or standing beside the starting platform. They may start in the water, and as is spoken about earlier, the vision impaired athlete will need more time than normal to orientate themselves to be stationary at the start. Support staff can be used to assist in balancing a swimmer for a stationary start. Now, you may not have seen this, but we actually have a feet start, and this is can be used by the classes 1 to 3 by having their feet held against the wall once they are in the water. These swimmers are severely handicapped, and sometimes they start in the water with a support staff holding their feet against the wall, and it can be a little bit disconcerting because sometimes they start face down in the water. So you've got to make sure that you get those kids away as quickly as you can after considering all the other swimmers in the event. We don't want them drowning. So moving on from the starts, we'll look at some of the rules throughout the execution of the strokes. So you can see 11.3.1 states that the athlete with only one functional leg being used to execute that stroke, then the non-functional leg shall drag. Now, the interpretation here is that the non-functioning leg, when dragged, may give the appearance of alternating due to the normal up and down movement of the body throughout the race. Now, the official, when judging this stroke, must ensure that the non-functioning leg is not providing any propulsion. Butterfly swimming. Now, this has caused a few issues of late, as you will probably be aware, not only with multi-class swimmers, but also with our able-bodied swimmers. But for today, we'll look at multi-class. So rule 11.5.2, these are all, WPS rules, by the way, which can be found on the website or in the WPS handbook. So rule 11.5.2 states that both arms must be brought forward simultaneously over the water and brought backward simultaneously under the water throughout the race. Now, the interpretation here is talking about the entire arm from the shoulder to the wrist, and that it must recover over the water and not just part of the arm recovering. It must be the whole arm from the shoulder to the wrist. There is, however, no requirement to see space between the arm and the water. Butterfly again, 11.5.2.4, deals with the swimmer who only uses one arm for the stroke and the position of the body during the race. It states that the body must remain in line with the normal water surface, and the interpretation or intent of this rule is to ensure that the swimmer retains the integrity of the butterfly stroke. Further interpretation of this rule is that the official, when judging this athlete during butterfly, views the body, which they deem, WPS deem, to be the trunk of an athlete, including the shoulders, throughout the race. They must observe the swimmer stays on the breast and in line with the normal water surface and not swimming on the side with a dropped shoulder. They should ensure the integrity of the stroke so that butterfly does not look or become freestyle. It's a tough call, but that's the rule. So we're going to move away from the strokes now. I think apart from those couple that we've talked about, most of the rules are as per normal able-bodied rules with the odd exception. So we'll talk about, a lot of people when they look or work at a multi-class meet get a little bit confused that in multi-class, the athlete who finishes first is not always the athlete that takes home the gold medal, which can be a little bit confusing. It's not our job as a deck official to sort that out. This is done inside. And the reason why this is not first past the post wins is that because sometimes you'll see that swimmers are swimming against different classes, and therefore takes away the equality of the athletes that are competing. Now, to get around this, results are calculated on a multi-class point score system known as the MCPS. And how that works is the time that the swimmer achieves in the race is then calculated as a percentage of the world record for that distance, that stroke, the gender, and the class of the athlete. Once done, the swimmer who comes closest to that world record and who has the highest point score in the system is deemed the winner of that race. Now, you don't, as I said, you don't have to worry about any of that because to make all of this possible, the Meet Manager program that is responsible for results at able-bodied and multi-class events has a built-in multi-class point scoring MCPS system and is able to calculate this in the background when determining places. Now you might say, well, what if we don't have Meet Manager, or it's a lesser higher level meet and we don't have Meet Manager, or it's not available? That point scoring system calculator can be found on the Swimming New South Wales website and also the Swimming Australia website. So if you really do have several swimmers, you're not using Meet Manager, but you do want to have them swim together, but be fair in the outcome, then go online at either Swimming New South Wales or Swimming Australia, check out the multi-class point scoring calculator, and you'll be able to just jot in the swimmer's class, his time, and the calculator will work it all out for you. Very nifty. Okay, so just to wrap things up today, I wanted to touch on a few protocols that should be put into practice at multi-class meets, or meets at least where multi-class swimmers are attending. Firstly, it is the responsibility of the referee to obtain and implement the rule exceptions for athletes with a disability who are competing. Now, once again, if this is not supplied to you by the promoting body, a national classification master list can be found on the SAL website. So you can go onto the SAL website, look for the classification master list, and that will tell you exactly what your swimmer's class and exceptions are. So if it's not supplied, please feel free to use that master list to check it out yourself. Also, at these meets, judges of strokes should remain standing approximately 5 metres from the finish of each multi-class race and observe that the swimmers are exiting the pool safely and assist if required. Judges of strokes also should be responsible for checking the goggles of any Class 11 swimmer at the end of each of their events. Now, if you have a Class 11 swimmer swimming several strokes, it's not good enough to check his goggles or her goggles once at the finish of the first race. They should be checked at the finish of each race that that swimmer competes in. They have been known to swap goggles. So it is extremely important to judge multi-class swimmers as able-bodied competitors, after which the official should then apply the codes of exceptions to what they view. Judge what you see and not what you think you saw. Giving the benefit of the doubt, as we know, is always the primary function of the official. If you are uncertain of exactly what you saw or what the athlete did. However, never confuse giving the benefit of the doubt with abdicating that responsibility. Officials must be prepared to make calls when and where appropriate, and sometimes that is a hard call.
Yeah.
as we talked about at the beginning, this is no less than what these competitors expect from us as officials. So the primary responsibility of the technical official is to apply the swimming rules and to ensure a fair competition for all the athletes. Officials should officiate by the rules and then check the codes, not the other way around. And as we always say, there is absolutely no substitute for that rule book. It is totally necessary that you have a thorough and clear understanding of the rules. If you have a clear understanding and thorough knowledge of the rules, you'll be able to not only officiate at a multi-class meet, but at an able-bodied meet, and it will put you in the best stead ever. And that's it from me today. Questions? Thank you.
Sherry, good afternoon.
Hello.
An excellent presentation.
Thank you.
One small item that you didn't pick up. At the starting, we sometimes have a swimmer sitting on the edge of the pool to start.
I thought I said can be sitting or starting beside the pool, beside the block.
No, sometimes sitting on the edge of the pool.
Sitting, standing, kneeling. The intent there was that they can start in several different positions and that they can be starting beside the pool, either, as I said, kneeling, standing, sitting. The choice is theirs. There is no restrictions on how they start.
Yep.
There used to be years ago a W on their classification card, and that would indicate that they were allowed to actually have a water start. That doesn't exist anymore. So if a multi-class swimmer wants to jump in the water to start that race, then that is fine. That's fine. Hope that answers that, George.
Thank you.
There's a lot of things I didn't cover. A bit hard in 40 minutes, 30 minutes. Does anybody else have any questions about what we talked about that they didn't quite understand? Anybody? I hope it made it a little bit clearer for you, because as I said at the beginning, it can be very daunting. And a lot of people, because they don't understand these codes and classes and blah, 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 they veer away from officiating at multi-class. And it's really such a shame, because as I said right at the very beginning, multi-class swimmers can give you, this is me personally, and I know a lot of people here that are listening today have assisted multi-class meets, and they will all agree and they will all tell you one of the greatest experiences that you can do in swimming. It's absolute pleasure to officiate those swimmers.
Sherry, it's Ben. Can I just ask a brief question? And thank you for such a fantastic presentation. Every time I hear one of these, I learn something.
Thanks, Ben.
I don't do a lot of multi-class, but from what I understand, there's currently old classifications and new classifications. There's old exceptions and new exceptions, and I just can't understand the difference between them. Is there a way of being clear when I'm looking at these things, whether I'm looking at an old one or a new one?
If you're looking at an old one, they'll have a classification 6, a number 6. Now, what they've done what they tried to do was and I think they've achieved it, is they've tried to bring it into like groupings. So they've put the butterfly together, the breaststroke together, and they've done away with the 6, which I think somebody can let me know if I'm wrong here. And I don't have my book with me at the table here. It's over the back there. They've just combined the 6 into the intent and the one-handed touch and things like that. So if you see a 6, if you've got I'll just see if I can bring up those codes of exceptions for you.
It sounds like there's not much difference between them then.
There's not.
Okay, all right. Well, let's keep it at that then. Thank you.
Can you see that on the screen? Let's just go back to here and share screen. Can I not share my screen anymore, Josh?
We can see the reflection of it in your glasses, Sherry.
Should be able to. Let's give it one more go from now.
Okay, that's better. Okay, share that one. So what you'll see, or you should have in your folders as a technical official, if you're going to officiate at multi-class swimmers, should have this little piece of paper. It's a double-sided here. So it just goes through what we talked about today, the starts with the letters, and during the swimming with the code, with the numbers. And you can see there on the screen, there is no number 6. So if you have a number 6 on your codes of exception sheet, don't throw it away by all means, because some swimmers are still officiated under those old codes. However, I think at our level, at New South Wales level and below, this is the one that you will be seeing the swimmers are being officiated under. And a little bit further down on the back page or the second page, it goes into what I've done today and gives you a little bit more of an insight into what those codes and letters mean. And it also, if you have a look there, the WPS rule regulation. So you'll be able to go to your WPS 2018-21 handbook and read all about it. But that's, Ben, I think in a nutshell, it's not, you go with that new one. They just tried to simplify it.
Thanks, Sherry.
Unless somebody else has another opinion from the TSC that I may be missing, please jump in. Okay.
We'll just quickly go. I had a couple of questions in the chat that went before we might move straight on to Graham's talk. Rather than people can duck off and have a quick break if they want to, but just to save time, I know we're a bit behind. We'll just do these couple of questions with Sherry, and then Graham can get straight into his. So we have a question from Anne, and it's come through. It says, is there ever talk of a separate classification for Down syndrome swimmers? They're currently S14, but some can physically not perform some strokes, but they're not allowed to be anything except S14. So feel that this is a group that are not really in a fair classification. So do you have any thoughts or knowledge on that?
Yeah, I do actually. I was reading about it yesterday, and I'm going to pronounce it wrong, but anyway, I'll have a crack at it. So years ago, years and years and years ago, there used to be an S17. An S17 used to take into consideration people with atraxia, I'm going to say. I don't know. So these athletes were athletes that were lumped in, or are now lumped in with the S14, the disability swimmers. These swimmers, as anybody that has been to a multi-class event knows, an S14 swimmer, an intellectually impaired swimmer, physically is really, really capable of swimming up there with the able bodies. And some of our very famous multi-class swimmers have done that and do it and beat them. The only difference is that a multi-class swimmer, as you can appreciate, will have different mental abilities across a spectrum. And therefore, you might find that they're a challenge in the marshalling area or a challenge at the start because they just don't understand or cannot comprehend what is needed from them. And also the Down syndrome, they are also lumped in with the S14s. And there's a big push underway at the moment across the world, not just in Australia, but across several countries, to have the Down syndromes have a classification unto themselves. Because as you can imagine, or you may not know, Down syndrome swimmers are very short statured as well. So physically they look all right, the facial features, but they're short. They're a lot shorter. You're never going to have a James Magnuson Down syndrome swimmer, ever. It's never going to happen. So therefore, just by the sheer strength and size of the able-bodied swimmers, or the S14 swimmer bodies, the Down syndromes will never be able to compete. I mean, there has been the odd occasion where medals have been won by Down syndromes. So all I can tell you with that is that, and there is a big push underway to get Down syndromes classified separately. And I'm thinking that may end up being an S17. Watch this space. Any others, Josh?
Yep. So we had probably one you you probably can't answer because it's probably more for Swimming Australia. But Janelle has asked, re the accessible master list of the master classifications that's on the Swimming Australia website. How much security is around that list to ensure its integrity, but also to protect their personal details?
Not much. You can go
Yeah.
on there and you can have a look at the swimmer's name, what they're, I know it used to have, and I don't know, this is when I was working at Swimming New South Wales, it used to have their address, date of birth, everything that we now consider a privacy issue. So I actually haven't been on there for a little while. I'm not sure, but you can definitely see their classifications, their disabilities, when they're up for reclassification and all sorts of things like that. So probably I'd have to say not too much.
Yeah,
privacy.
I don't think their address or anything like that is there anymore,
No, I
for
don't
sure,
think
but it
so
needs
either.
to be publicly available, I think, for event
It does.
organisers to have that access in case they're not able to present their card or whatever it is at the time, their classification card. So, but it is, if that's the case.
I think it depends on these swimmers and their carers and parents and things are very open. They're very open people and they don't feel they have a lot to hide. And I know with listening to Lydia earlier, just the simplest gesture from an official or somebody passing by can be misconstrued as to something that's not proper. So I guess it depends on what they feel is transgressing that privacy factor. But it is there. It's there for you to see if you want to. Go and have a look at it, check it out and see what you think. You think it's private enough.
Okay, and I'm hoping I don't miss anything. I've got one more question, I think. We've got one, sorry. Yes, Sandy, there's also one from Marie just above, so we'll do Marie's first.
Okay, go.
Gloria just sent a message to access this info. Would you need to be a SAL member? No, it's on the Swimming Australia website.
So I went in yesterday, just click on it. It's just the link.
You can just Google Swimming Australia Master Classification List and it should take you to that page.
Yep, I can. It's a bit tricky to find, I've got to tell you.
Yeah, it's not. Yeah, that's right.
But I do have the links here, which I will type in if you like. Or send to you.
If you like, I can put it on the forum webpage as well that I'll create after this.
All right then. No worries.
Leave that
I did
to me.
put them down, but I didn't put them actually on the screen because it just becomes a little bit too much. But they're definitely there, and I will send a link to you in a couple of minutes once we finish this chat.
Yeah, no problem. So Marie asked, what happens if the swimmer does not show their card before they race and a report is made?
Okay, well, once again, it depends on the level of the competition. As we said, that at state meets where we are supplied, luckily, by the promoting body, we get a list of the swimmers' exceptions and their codes and their classifications, and so we don't have to worry about the swimmers coming and showing us their cards. However, at a meet where we are not supplied that, if the multi-class swimmer comes to you and they show your card, then they are actually exempt, or they have the exceptions and they are refereed accordingly. Depends on the level of meet. If you do have a multi-class swimmer and they come to you, and they don't come to you with their card, and they say don't turn one of their feet out during the breaststroke kick, and an official comes and reports that, if they have not showed you the card by the letter of the law, they should be disqualified because they have no exceptions. So it's a bit tough. It's a tough call, and it will depend. I always like to say, use your common sense. If we're talking little kids at a local pool and they haven't showed the card, well, and they clearly have a problem with their leg or their feet or whatever, then you will use your common sense with that. At a higher level meet, if they don't show your card, I mean, really they should be disqualified because they are then swimming under no exceptions. Bottom line.
Thanks, Sherry. And the final.
Be an official or a mum.
Final question from Sandy. Sherry, just wondering, with the vision impaired, you mentioned all S11 to 13 must wear blackened goggles. Are these a sanctioned item, e.g. purchased that way, or are they blackened out manually from normal goggles?
It's only the S11, not the 12s or the 13s, just the S11s that must wear blackened goggles unless they have prosthetic eyes or no eyes. Now I've looked at a few blackened goggles, and I'm thinking, maybe somebody else can answer this if they know, most of them look like they've been painted, which is why we check them too, because if they get scratched, then we end up with a clear lens, and a swimmer may be able to, they're not supposed to be able to see through them, but I guess it all goes back to trying to keep everybody honest and everybody on the level playing field. There possibly is blackened goggles that you can buy for that purpose. I'm not sure, but I know the ones I've looked at, I would suggest have clearly been painted. Can anyone else answer that maybe in the know? Bob, do you know? No? Shaking his head.
What was the
can you
question
talk?
again,
Yep.
Sherry?
Yep.
Sherry Gus, what was the question again?
Yeah, what was the question? The blackened goggles that the S11 swimmers are mandatorily have to wear, are they produced somewhere, or are they just the ordinary goggles with a bit of paint on them? And I said that the only ones I've ever seen or looked at have been actually painted. You could see they've been painted, but they may be able to buy them somewhere made that way. I'm not sure. Do you know?
Yeah.
There is a web, so I've just had a look online. You can get them. There's a company in Japan make them. I've got them.
Got them?
swansoverseas.com. You can get black goggles.
I wouldn't be surprised, because obviously there's a lot of swimmers need them, so I wouldn't be surprised that somebody's gotten on the market and produced them, which is great. They still need to be checked though.
Yeah.
From our point of view as officials, we still need to check the blackened goggles, whether they're homemade or bought made.
All right, thank you, Sherry.
Okay,
thanks for
everyone
the
for listening.
presentation. Thanks for the questions, guys. And I think we'll move straight on to Graham's presentation, the final one, and then we can finish up and everyone can go and have lunch. So, yeah, Graham, if you don't mind,
Josh.
you can. There you go.
Yep.
Now, I know I'm going to be sharing the screen for you.
Yeah.
Did you want me to bring up the first one now, or not quite yet?
Not quite yet.
No
So,
problem.
thanks, Sherry. That was a great presentation.
Thank you.
We obviously, as the TSC, we review feedback from previous forums, and MC meets rates up there as, you know, what attendees would like to hear and see more of, MC rules. So it was important to let Sherry speak on that and get as many questions as possible. The other feedback we get that's right up there is that we never allow time for questions. So I'm conscious that I have a short presentation and question time, and realising it's after 1 o'clock already. So I'm happy to carry on with my presentation or just move straight into questions. And if there are people still on the line, I can move into my presentation then. One thing the TSC has talked about is holding mini forums between now and when we get back into swimming to maintain your interest and enthusiasm in the sport. And those mini forums would essentially be around the rules. So just gauging by chat, I might move into my presentation then. So I know the agenda says a close look at butterfly swimming. My intention is to look solely at swim rule 8.5, which is basically around the submerged rule.
So just a couple of questions to kick off, and I'll probably answer them just to save a bit of time. So if a swimmer is fully submerged prior to the touch at the wall at a turn, is this a disqualification? So fully submerged at the touch, prior to the touch at the wall at the turn, is a DQ. If a swimmer is completely submerged prior to the finish or at the finish, is this an infraction? And the answer to that is yes. So essentially, as I said, we're looking at swim rule 8.5, and it's a rule that's not new. It's been around for quite a while. The swimming on the surface rule was introduced to butterfly as well as freestyle and backstroke a long time ago to make sure, or to prevent swimmers swimming the entire length underwater. A couple of years ago, we had a presentation from someone from Queensland University, I think it was, representing Queensland swimming on the biomechanics of swimming. So why some actions are possible, why some actions are impossible or hard to do. And I think the very nature of butterfly and its unusual movements can represent challenges to technical officials. So might just go with the first one. Thanks, Josh. My first slide.
Yep, sure thing.
Sorry, Josh and I went through this on Friday and I had trouble sharing documents on my computer. So essentially why I've decided to concentrate on swim rule 8.5 is that over recent months, I've received a number of emails from parents and coaches, some of them not nice, about their child being disqualified for being fully submerged at the finish. So being able to explain the rule to them, review the infraction, which is written in accordance with the rule, the infraction card makes it a lot easier for me to address parents and coaches' concern. So another highlight of why it's important to write your infraction cards out in accordance with the rule, not only for protest or jury of appeal, but some people do send queries through after. So in all those cases, it was clear that the swimmer was completely submerged at the end. So as you can see in this graphic, top ones are pretty poor butterfly stroke. Obviously a lot of effort goes into that. The one below that is a more efficient and faster butterfly stroke, which can provide challenges to the official because they're not out of the water all that much. Josh, the next one, please. So it's important when you're making a determination about when, if a swimmer is submerged, to look at the entire body of the swimmer. You know, what's the head's doing, what are the hands doing, the hips doing, the legs, the feet, even the soles of the feet. Because if the head's down, maybe the hip is up, or the heel of the foot is above the water. The next slide might show that a bit more too. Thanks, Josh.
Yep, bringing that up.
Thank you. So by its very nature, there are parts of the body during butterfly that will be out of the water at any one time. However, with the finish or with the turn, when they are lunging to the finish or the turn, that's where the challenge arises for the technical official, because as I said, you have to look at the swimmer's whole body to ensure that they are indeed submerged at the end or at the turn. So swim rule SW85 is pretty clear that at the start of the turns, the swimmer is permitted one or more leg kicks and one arm pull under the water, which must bring them to the surface. It's permissible for them to be submerged for a distance of not more than 15 metres after the start and after each turn. By that point, the head must have broken the surface of the water. The swimmer must remain on the surface until the next turn or finish. So as I said, there are a few parents that weren't aware of that rule, and even a few coaches that weren't aware of that rule. So it could be worth, when you do disqualify someone for that for some reason a lot of people haven't heard of the rule before, and as I said, it's been in the rule books for a long time. They just might need a bit more explanation than normal. So really very quickly, that's all I wanted to cover on butterfly, which was specifically around 8.5. Are there any questions on that?
Yeah, hi Graham, Marcus here. I put a little note in before while you were talking. One of the instances where this was happening wasn't so much at the turns. This was at regionals before everything shut down. And it was fully submerged through the race, as opposed to the turns is where we ran into a lot of trouble.
Sure. Sorry, Marcus, is there a question there, or is it just?
Oh no, just there was a lot of DQs around it, which created a lot of noise, and I thought part of this, the noise may have transpired into this interpretation. That's all. I wasn't sure.
Oh, okay.
But, we had a lot of them abnormally, you could say, but they were all, and it was mostly, unfortunately, the younger ones because it was regionals, and so the impact was a bit more dramatic than you would normally see at a I suppose, older age groups.
Yeah, understand. And, it became clear in the emails I received that, even the coaches weren't quite clear on the rule. So as I said, as with all DQs, please take the time to explain the relevant rule if you get a query after it. Thanks, Marcus. Any other questions? Because I'm conscious that as a group we haven't met since informally or at a meet since State Open, where so we haven't had the chance to interact and talk as we normally do. So if there's no more specific comments on the butterfly rule, and I just saw a chat that there was a lot of splash in butterfly, which can make it harder to adjudicate on. If there's no more specific questions on butterfly, I'll just throw the floor open to any questions participants might have. And is this a good idea? And I know I saw a chat earlier on that nothing does beat face-to-face conversation, but in these times, I think this has been a fantastic result.
It's good for the regional guys.
Yeah, I know, and with the participants as well. It's been fantastic. Are there any questions to the TSC in particular?
Graham, Greg Skinner here. A quick question on, I've heard conflicting interpretations of the elbows above the water, under the water, continuously through breaststroke. And the latest version I've heard of that is it is permissible to have elbows out of the water on the, say, the recovery or the non-propulsive stroke, but they must be under the water whilst moving forward. Would you like to comment on that, please? Or what you expect the rule should be? When I read the rule, it looks like elbows need to be under the water throughout the race continuously.
Yep, thanks for that question. I don't know if any of the other TSC would like to talk after me, but I can let you know that it's been a source of conversation at TSC meetings and a source of quite hot debate. We have sought clarification from SAL, and they've provided their feedback, and we've sought clarification from SAL last week. Our TSC seems to be split in regards to, does it include the backward movement or just the forward movement? I know our training notes refer to the fact that it only refers to the forward movement of the arms. So this is why we're getting further clarification on this, that the training notes were written a while ago, albeit they're updated regularly. That has remained in there. So I don't know if any of the other TSC members would like to comment. And it probably doesn't answer your question in terms of what do I do, but I guess, you know, when you move your arms backwards, there is probably the likelihood that the elbows do pop out of the water sometimes. Sherry or Faye or Peter?
I think, Graham, it's Faye. I just think at the moment we're still trying to get clarification from Swimming Australia around it, because we are divided and it, if you do a search of the internet, you will find an American interpretation that basically says that it's only an infraction if that it's part of the recovery, part of the stroke, so the forward motion of the stroke. So and so there is conflicting information out there, and so I think it's best if we probably hopefully get clarification from SEL and then put something in our newsletter, maybe.
I have just been onto my email and we have a response from SAL, and I've just asked Ben if he's happy for me to share that with everybody at the forum today, and he said that yes, he is. So the response from SAL is that I think, number one, they're not going to forward it on to FINA. What they have come back with and replied with is that elbows shall be under the water except for the turn and the finish. So whether it be the forward push or the backward pull, the elbows must remain under the water. Am I reading that right, Ben?
Just to be clear, I'm on this call as a technical official in New South Wales, not speaking on behalf of Swimming Australia, but basically, yes, the TSC's guidance is that it should be interpreted exactly as written. So regardless about whether it's forward or backwards, it's whether it's under or not, except for, of course, the turn exceptions that are already in the rules. So don't read any more into it than is written in the rules.
Thank you.
And there is acknowledgement, I think, offline that there are various interpretations in circulation.
Okay, thank you. I didn't see that, so it only just come in, I assume. So the TSC will work quickly to put something out.
Yeah, definitely.
But thank you. That was a very good question. Thank you.
We have one question in the chat from Bruce. It says, would it be fair to say that a swimmer performing a breath every stroke in fly is more likely to infringe the submerged rule? The 2 DQs I have seen have both been in this scenario.
Yeah, I wouldn't think so.
Graham, that's Chris.
Oh, Chris, you're on still?
Look, I think that comes back to the actual coaching. It shouldn't make any difference to the likelihood of them being disqualified. If they're taking their breath at the correct point in the stroke, it fits in beautifully. So I don't think that's a reason that would cause extra disqualifications.
Graham, it's Faye again. It seems like there's people concerned about seeing fully submerged throughout the race. Just as an example, at our area championships earlier this year, we observed some swimmers, particularly even in the older age groups in the 200 butterfly, when they start to tire, they were completely submerged during the stroke. So they would do their arm stroke and would be very fully submerged, and you could actually see quite a bit of water between them and the surface of the water. So I think the key is to watch the whole body. So if you are a judge of stroke, it's much easier to see as a judge of stroke, is to walk that little bit behind the swimmers so that you can see that all the body is completely submerged at that time. And as always, if there's any doubt, we wouldn't report that. So I don't think there's any particular pattern that we should be looking for. What we should be is just making sure that when we do see it, that we're confident that what we're seeing is that the body is completely submerged under the water at that point of time.
Thanks, Faye. Any other questions or just general questions about TSC? And I know it's a difficult time, but there does seem to be light at the end of the tunnel. Last week or the week before, I think it was, Mark Heathcote wrote to the TSC and asked us to look at changes to marshalling and other pool deck procedures so that if we do resume, we comply with federal and state requirements in terms of social distancing and hygiene and all that sort of thing. So, as I said, there's light in the end of the tunnel, and I know the board's working hard at getting us back in the water, but doing it safely, and they're working with SAL and Sport New South Wales and other groups about how that might look like. So I don't think we can expect that when we do get back in the water, life will be exactly the same. There may or may not be changes to how we marshal, how we check start, how many timekeepers or ITs we have behind the blocks, all that sort of thing. So it's quite complex, but I can assure you that Swimming New South Wales are working hard to get us back in the water. But obviously we don't want to be a ruby princess of the pool. We have to return safely. But it's looking a lot more promising than, a month or so ago. Any other questions?
Is that the Ruby Princess in your background?
I'm not quite sure.
Hopefully not.
Hopefully not. Any other questions? As I said, just generally about swimming, TSC rules. If not, I might shortly hand back to Josh, but thank you all for your time today. As Josh said, it'd be great to get your feedback on this sort of forum. And as I said, we are talking about sort of mini forums, maybe half an hour or an hour, where we just talk about the rules and perhaps a guest speaker to get us enthused again before we are back in the water. I'm sorry I can't see everyone, and I know people are jumping on or off, but thank you to our board members and wife members who have taken part in this forum today. And we've had a couple of interstate visitors from Victoria. So thank you for joining us, and thank you also to our presenters, Sarah, Lydia and Sherry. So Josh, I just might hand back to you, thanks.
Yeah, so not much more from me. I'll just get all of the information and the recording up on our website as soon as possible. So probably Monday, everything should be up. Hopefully the recording will be up there as well. So you can just pass this on to any other officials that couldn't make it today, and or you can just rewatch this at any point. So hopefully there won't be any dramas with that. I'll have there's a few virtual handouts that Sherry had that I'll post up on that page as well. I'll add Lydia's email address, or the integrity@swimming.org.au email address too, onto that page. And I'll be adding a few other things too, including the link to the multi-class classification list that's available on the SAL website. So again, if you have any comments or feedbacks to send to send through to me, that would be really good. If you have anything, and if you want to be involved or have your comments involved in the TSC newsletter coming out on Tuesday, send that through to me and let me know by the end of the weekend. So that's pretty much all from me. So thank you all for attending. Thank you again, like Graham said, to the presenters, including yourself, Graham. But if there's any more questions, just send me an email and I'll pass that on to the right person or try and answer it myself. So thank you,
Josh.
everyone.
Thank you, Josh, for putting it all together. Thank you.
Not a problem. My pleasure. Thank you all, and have a nice
everyone.
rest of your day.
Yep, thanks all. See you.
Thank you, Josh, and all the presenters.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Been great. See you all on pool deck.
Thanks, guys. See you on pool deck.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye all.
See you there.
See you, Jerome.
Bye, Gloria.
Bye,
all. Bye all.
Bye, John. Bye, Marie.
Bye,
Gloria.
Bye.
Bye, Jerome.
Bye. Marie.
Right.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, Bill.
Bye.
Oh, Anthony.
Hi, John. Hi, John. Hi, John.
Dave, yours is shocking.
Stay healthy, guys.